you got to figure it's Rachel and I have been together 37 years. There's a lot of life that's occurred in that time, because at the end of the day, I'm just still that 16-year-old kid who stands in front of a mirror with the first guitar I ever bought, pretending to be Ace Frehley or Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads.
That pre-chat could have been the whole interview.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Dave and Keith Sports Hour.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Welcoming in Dave Snake Sabo. I met you many years ago. I followed Skid Row for many years, followed your exploits in the music industry as well. Thanks for just doing what you do, holding up and supporting a lot of cool bands. And
thank you, man. That's really kind. You can call me Snake. Everybody does. My kids call me Snake, but in the worst possible way.
Okay, your kids call you Snake. That's amazing. I never know. You know, we interview all kinds of bands from all over the world, and my favorite is the black metal bands who are like, I don't answer to my human being name, which is amazing. You can see there's interviews here. It's funny.
Cool. I will. I'll check it out. That's really funny.
Yeah, you know, like, yeah, it's so cool. You know, like, congratulations on this new record. It's such a banger, and I think there was a lot of high anticipation in general for this record. And then, you know, Erik was like the cherry on top, man. His performance is outstanding.
Really is. I mean, I can't heap enough praise on the talent that he possesses and what the electricity and the positivity that he's brought to our Skid Row family. And it goes beyond just the band members. In all actuality, it goes to our road crew, our management, our record label. It really, there's a certain palpable energy that he brings that is undeniable and infectious. And so when he joined the band and just hearing his like first take performances of these songs, we were all blown away. We're like, wow, like, this is his first take. Like, imagine what it's going to be like, you know, a couple takes from now type of thing. And he's just such a pro. He's so happy to be here. He's got his own incredible story as well. And so seeing what he's gone through and his appreciation for life as a whole is really, really inspiring.
Well, that's really important. And I think that's something that can't be overstated is you got to want it. Right. You have to want, this business is hard. You're not always going to get your way. You guys are a veteran band. It's not your first rodeo by far. And you have to have a person that falls in line with the same goals as the rest of the guys in the band.
Yeah. I mean, not too long ago, here was a guy that didn't even know if he was going to have it tomorrow, you know? And so the fact that he was able to battle and overcome cancer and thrive, doing what he does really, really well, which is singing and being in the band and creating. It's really an inspiring story.
Indeed. I love, in general, the Gang's All Here mentality that just pervades the whole album, not just the title. And the guys on the front cover, it is like, you know, it feels like a super team effort. And it's a very deep,
it absolutely was. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a deep record all the way through, which we're going to get to in a few. But I really love I listened to this for the first time with a buddy, and we were listening through the beginning of it. It's like, man, it's just like one after the other. Is like no drop off.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. It was a absolute labor of love from the start to the finish, and you know, it didn't always go smoothly, to say the least. But we always had the same goals and ambition in mind. And so, you know, I'm thankful that guys like you are responding to it. And it's been really overwhelming, the amount of goodwill that's been thrown our way.
Word. I love hearing that also right back at you. And you know, even our own reviewer, Duncan Evans, who's a fellow in the UK, I was surprised how much he loved the record. He's got great ears and he's very critical and he's a very good writer. And he was like, this record is great and magical. Wow. And all these things he was throwing around, these superlatives. I was definitely like, oh, we don't know how, you know, I never promise. That's how PR, they hate to see a bad review, right? And they can't all be winners, but
Of
You know,
course.
it's nice when you line up with a record that you want it to be good and it is good, and you hear it, and it's a real refreshing thing for this year. And we've had, it was a very deep year of records. We reviewed over 600 records this year. It's crazy.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to ask about Nick Raskulinecz, right? Because he's a super, like, he worked with the cream of the crop and the top of the heap. What did he bring to the table working with him? He's just such a known quantity as a person and a guy in the business.
This record doesn't happen without Nick. And that's just the way it is. It was straight up. We were at a crossroads a couple different times in the process of making this record. We started early on, probably about, the beginning of the writing kind of started around 2017 or 18, sporadically, not 5 days a week type of thing. But we were coming up with stuff, and at that time liked what we were coming up with. The further we moved along, and this even went into the early stages of the pandemic, we were kind of iffy about what we were creating. And then the pandemic came, and it affected everybody differently. Me personally, it completely curbed my creativity. Rachel was being, and the guys, I believe as a whole, were being much more creative than I was. I didn't feel it was this cycle of coming up with stuff, not believing it was any good, feeling like I'm useless, and then coming up with stuff that I didn't think was good and feeling useless. It was this vicious circle that I was in. Luckily, there was still progress being made, but we weren't quite there. So when we were edging towards, maybe it was May of 21, I'm not really good with dates and stuff like that. Rachel had called me and said, you ever hear this guy, Nick Raskulinecz? I'm like, oh my God, yeah, of course. I don't know him personally, but obviously his resume speaks for itself. And he goes, well, I just met him. And he goes, he's a super nice guy. He's a Jersey guy. I'm like, oh, there you go. Right off the bat, he's a brother. And he said he wants to produce a Skid Row record. I'm like, oh, wow, that's awfully nice. And we both were kind of cynical about it. There's just a guy who's in the same industry as you and knows your music and, is being nice. So that's really what we thought. I'll be honest with you. We're like, why would a guy of that stature care to produce a record by us? And as it turns out, the next time he saw Rachel, which wasn't too long from the first time, he said the same thing again. And Rachel called me and goes, I think he's serious. And I go, well, let's pursue this if we can. So we got in Rachel got in more talks with him, and he's like, dude, I really want to do this. Like, I'm not kidding. I want to do a Skid Row record because I know your whole career. I know these songs by heart. I'm a fan. And so we all got on a Zoom together, and we're just like, dude, this is like an honor that you want to do this. Lay it out how you want to do it. And logistically, it was not a problem. Figuring out all the semantics of management, record label, and all that stuff, and all the business aspect of it, that was easy. And then he basically said, I want to make the quintessential Skid Row record. And we were like, well, that sounds great, but like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, you guys have drifted from where you were when you guys first started out. And he's like, and that's understandable. You got to figure Rachel and I have been together 37 years. There's a lot of life that's occurred in that time. And he goes, but I want to bring you back to the essence of why you guys started doing this in the first place. So immediately for me, that struck a chord, because at the end of the day, I'm just still that 16-year-old kid who stands in front of a mirror with the first guitar I ever bought, pretending to be Ace Frehley or Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads. And to have him say that, and to have it strike that chord with me and open up that window again, that fire still burns in there. And it happened to everybody that was on the call, and their own interpretation of what that meant to them. And so once he said that, he started going about it like, I want to hear everything that you've written, and then we're going to deconstruct and rebuild what we need to do. And I was like, we've never really done that before. We've always come to the studio with like a batch of songs and made some little changes here and there, but really, you know, they were kind of the same as we wrote and rehearsed them. And so first, me personally, because of my ego, I was a little, you can't touch our children, you know? And I don't know if any of the other guys felt that way. And that was a brief moment. And then, you know, you put the ego aside and you go, wow, that sounds really like a challenge. Like we're being challenged right now. I like that. And so the next idea was, okay, let's figure out when we could get in a room and start working. And so we went to his studio in Nashville, and we all set up in the live room, and the four of us, Rob, Scotty, Rachel, myself, and Nick, were in the live room, and we just cranked everything up, and in a circle started jamming. And he would start going, I love that. But right after that, instead of doing what you did, let's do something like a halftime thing like you did in the middle of Beggar's Day. And we're like, what? That's awesome. And so he was guiding us to channel the inner youth, if you will, of the band. And obviously we're you know, long in the tooth now and all that stuff. But that vibe of why we started Skid Row and why we wrote those songs still really is prevalent in our DNA. And so once we started that, and he started challenging us to be creative and to make something good, great, that was the fun part of us being able to go, yeah, man, I got you. How about this? And then it spreads to everybody. And everybody else starts up in the ante and up in the ante until you get where he goes, that's it. And the thing is, too, is that we learned very, very quickly that we had to put our trust in him. And in doing so, you really do have to leave your ego in the parking lot. You can't be coming in being protective and being defensive. You really have to have as open mind as possible and allow him to do what he does and be guided. And, you know, everybody's an alpha male. They want to be the one at the steering wheel, you know? So we were passengers, and it felt great. It really felt great because he's a musician, he's a songwriter, he's a producer, and he's a musicologist. And so his pedigree is such that he brings so much to the table that it's undeniable. And we had so much fun while we were doing it. I mean, it was one of those situations where we looked forward to going into the studio the next day. And by the time we were done, we were mentally and emotionally exhausted for that day, and went home and recouped and got back in it. And, you know, we like to have a drink here and there, you know, as we've been known. And we were really right. Didn't need any of that or want any of that. We were really, really, really laser focused. And he brought out the best in us from a musician standpoint, from a songwriting standpoint, from a performance standpoint. And it's one of the most incredible experiences. And I hold him and his process in such high regard that I honestly can't wait to work with him again.
Oh, that's amazing. And yeah, I would imagine that all that cynicism melts away when you get into that kind of loop and that kind of process, all the guys. And you mentioned it's not hard to be cynical because the business, as you are well acquainted with, you've had your ups and downs and challenges, you know, inward and outward. I wanted to ask your opinion about this before we jump into the next part of the interview, because I think you would have a very unique perspective on this. I've been watching the Pantera videos, and I'm sad that people are so mad about this. And I understand about the brothers, and rest in peace, Daryl and Vinny. These were friends of yours too. But I think it's the same thing. It's like the fans won't ever let you escape your own shadow, your own legacy for certain bands. You know, Skid Row came out of the gate crushing it for years. And that stuff is a mountain. You have to, unfortunately, a lot of bands have to live up to their past selves. Listen, man, I love Alice Cooper. He's got like 50 albums. He's like the Tony Bennett of metal. But like that early Alice Cooper stuff and the first few Alice Cooper solo records are so untouchable. Anything else he ever does is measured against it. And even I love his last record from last year. It was amazing. It's like, this thing is awesome. And this guy's like 70 something, like, give respect, but it's hard. I think it's hard for fans to let go, and it's hard for some bands to let go. So I wanted to get your perspective on that, because you definitely had to face that. Some fans will not let you evolve and be, Skid Row to 2022,
Well, here's the thing. Like with the Pantera thing, I love it because it's not a reunion of anything. It's a celebration of a legacy of a band that really changed music at a certain point in time. And I think that everybody needs to hear these songs live. And who better to have in the band than Charlie Benante and Zakk Wylde? There is no two better people to be paying tribute to Dime and Vinny than those two guys. And that's what this is. To me, it's a celebration of the music, of the band, of the legacy of the brothers. And I wanted to be in Mexico so bad for the first show, and unfortunately I've got some medical stuff that I have to tend to, and so I wasn't able to be down there. But I've been in contact with the guys, and their enthusiasm and their humility regarding it, like they're so thankful to have this opportunity to finally pay tribute and to bring a disjointed ensemble back together again through the greatness of what they produced, and have the great musicians involved that they do. With regards to us, there are no regrets whatsoever anywhere. I'm so thankful for our history, our complete history. And I say this every time I'm asked this question. Long before this record was even written and thought about, I've said it 10 years ago. I've said it 20 years ago. I'm thankful for everything and for everyone that's been a part of Skid Row through the years, because it brought us to this particular point, whatever that particular point is. The truth of the matter is, I'm incredibly thankful, as we all are, and humbled by the fact that I still get to play music for a living. That's the goddamn truth, man. At the very beginning, when we were all learning our instruments and playing in different bands, cover bands and all that stuff, and having the time of our lives and struggling and eating macaroni and cheese with tuna fish every night of the week for years and being penniless, all collectively and individually, all we ever wanted to do was to be able to make music for a living. How great would that be? Like, that's the 16-year-old me that still exists. And when we made our first record, I'm not sure what a lot of the guys felt, but I'm pretty sure Rachel and I, and I'm sure Scotty too, you all have these aspirations for selling, a gazillion records. But the reality for us was we just wanted to sell enough records to be able to make another one. That really was, we were ambitious and our work ethic was unrivaled. But that was all towards just please give us another chance after this one. Let us have the opportunity. And of course, as luck would have it, and how lucky we were, we sold a pretty good amount of records, and thus were able to continue this, and to this day. And so I understand people being attached to a certain point and time of their lives, and what that first couple records may have meant to them at that particular time in their lives. And I'm really thankful for that, because that means that we wrote stuff and played stuff that touched them in a really positive way. So I understand that attachment, and you want that feeling back. We all want those special nostalgic feelings back. And so some people are more apt to be receptive of something new than other people. We can't control that. All we can do is just do our very best and be proud of whatever record we make and whatever we write and the shows that we perform. And then from there on, it's out of our hands. So this whole thing that's occurring right now, and this attention that we're getting, and this record landed in the top 20 in like 10 or 11 countries, and I just found out last week that in the Burn magazine polls in Japan, it was number one, in front of Ozzy and Slipknot and bands and artists that I adore and respect. So this is new territory for us. This hasn't happened to us in 20 some years. And so it's really special. And we're so acutely aware of how lucky we are. And so however anybody wants to process this, it's truly up to them. And so far the response has been, overwhelmingly positive.
Word. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was really great. Assuming we still have time, let's bang through this track by track rundown of the album. I'd love to get your thoughts on this music. And, obviously I know you played on it and wrote it. So I'd love to hear what you think about these things. Here's my phone. It's like, let's play the album right now. All right. There goes my copyright with YouTube. The album can never win. The album kicks off with Hell or High Water.
Hell or High Water was a riff I've had for a little while, and we kind of didn't know where to go with it. We would touch upon it in the past, but it was like one of those things where we didn't spend a lot of time on it. And one of the reasons I think that happened is that for as long as I've had the riff, Rachel was hearing it kind of backwards. He didn't understand the riff the way I heard it until we put a drum beat to it. And he's like, oh my God, I've been hearing that backwards for so long. Maybe that's why we got stuck, because we weren't on the same page. Once that happened, that song came together pretty quick. We felt really strongly about where we were going with it. Thought lyrically it was really, really cool. Good imagery and metaphors and whatnot. And that's really something that Rachel excels at. He's a better lyricist than I am. Although we collaborated on it, on the lyrics in a lot of songs, he's the guy that usually comes up with the winning final line. Usually where it's like, how about this? And I'll go, great. Or how about this? And I'll go, why don't we do this? And he goes, well, how about this? And then there it is, So he's really an excellent lyricist, and it's such a pleasure to work with a guy like that. So once we were finished with it and we played it for Nick was like, oh my God, like that's Skid Row. Because that's exactly what I'm talking about. And after all was said and done, we heard the playback of it after we recorded. We're like, we got to open up the record with that. That's just, we got to punch people in the face, man. We've got to make an impression from the moment, that someone hits play. And so I'm really happy that we did. I'm proud of all the songs. I'm obviously proud of that.
Right on. The title track is the next one, The Gang's All Here.
That riff was written by a friend of ours, Paul Taylor, who is a guitar player and keyboard player in Winger and played in Alice Cooper and Tom Kiefer's band. And he is really good friends with Rachel and friends with me as well. And so we were going about writing with other people, and just, you learn different ways of doing things when you explore that. So Rachel went over to write him, and Paul goes, I write with him. And Paul goes, I got this riff. And Rachel heard it. He goes, hold on a second. He goes, let's hold on to this and wait for Snake to come down here, and we'll do this, because that is a Skid Row riff. And sure enough, I heard the riff. I'm like, wow, dude, like you captured it. And then Rachel had the title, The Gang's All Here. And it was as we're coming out of the pandemic, fighting to come out of it. It was all about rejoicing, and not in a sappy way, in a way of like, let's go out, all our buddies, let's get hammered, let's just celebrate life, like that type of thing. And that's our music. There's always been a silver lining with every song, whether you see it or not. There's a positive message in it. And to us, that song was as just a basic buddies, whether it's the band members or your buddies from high school or whatever, just getting together and throwing down. And as simple as it gets. And that was pretty evident at the very beginning that that was going to be the title track of the record.
Nice. Not Dead Yet is the next song, apropos also.
Rachel wrote this at the end of having the songs for the record. And Nick said to us, and we had like 12 or 13. And Nick goes, I think we need 2 more songs. So that was a case of Rachel bringing in this song and us going into SIR. And he's like, I've got this riff. I've got this idea. And then all of a sudden, I came up with an idea, or other people in the band came up with ideas to complete the song. And it was literally done. Well, again, we had never worked like that either. It was literally done in a couple hours, maybe. That was one of the songs that we absolutely needed on the record from a statement standpoint, from a tempo standpoint, from an aggression standpoint. Again, Nick knew what was Skid Row. And so when we worked on that, and we did the same thing as we did in the studio, we sat in a circle and banged it out and kept going until we had it all. I remember going home with, on my phone, the recordings of it, letting it sit for a few hours, listening to it, going, wow, from rehearsal, going, wow, like that says a lot about this band right now.
Nice. Time Bomb is the next track.
And Rachel brings in this song, like, yeah, I got this, because we're going, Nick goes, what else you guys got? And one of the first things Rachel goes, well, I got this thing. I don't know if you guys will like it, and blah, blah, blah. Starts playing this riff, and we're like, are you out of your mind? Like, that's a monstrous riff. And he goes, well, I kind of have the whole song if you guys, and we're like, dude, why would you not, because you never know. You just never know. Like something like you could be indecisive and not sure of something that you wrote, and then you present it to the rest of the guys, and everyone goes, that's awesome. It's got several great hooks in it. It's a monster riff. And again, here's a song that could have been on Slave to the Grind easily.
I agree, for sure. Resurrected is the next one.
That thing has seen so many iterations. It went from being, the opening riff and the verse riff to being an acoustic song with a different title and a different set of lyrics. And we just really liked the opening riff and the verse riff. And we decided to keep that and then scrap everything else. Again, Nick Raskulinecz coming in and start rebuilding this thing. And so it was another song title. And Rachel calls me up. He's like, I got this idea for this. Let's call it Resurrected. Like, boom, I'm sold. Let's go to work. And we went to work on it. And he started throwing lyrics out like crazy. I started coming up with some ideas musically and melodically. And that thing got put together in a matter of days from where it was. I mean, it sat for a long time in its original form. And we were always just like, we knew inherently like it was cool, but it wasn't cool enough yet. And I mean, we were as drastic as enough to do an acoustic thing with it. And that was cool too, but it just wasn't what we needed at that point.
I get it. Nowhere Fast is the next track.
Co-written with Johnny Andrews, who's a great songwriter. Something a little different for us, kind of like that 6/8 or 3/4 or 6/8 time signature, whatever you want to call it. I loved this from the very beginning, and I only grew to love it more after the band and Nick got a hold of it. That chorus came to life because of Scotty Hill. Scotty came up with those chord changes and the stops and goes, and we were like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, that's going to be a really killer chorus. And it's just a really fun song to play. I think that it's kind of indicative of where we might have been as a society at that particular point, facing this pandemic and kind of not figuring out how to get through it at that particular time.
Heavy, very heavy. Probably one of my favorite tracks is the next track, is When the Lights Come On.
All Rachel, his experiences in New York, referencing Tommy London from Sirius XM, who's a really good friend of his. And, you know, when Tommy was bartending downtown, and I'm not sure how long it took him to write it, but it was one of those songs where when you first heard it, it was like, this is okay. And then it grew on you. And it's such a fun song. And I love it so much because it's not a heavy topic. We have a lot of that stuff, but this isn't one of them. It's a fun song. It paints a really cool picture of, you know, being delinquents in New York City, downtown.
I know it all too well.
Yes,
I was that delinquent, or one of them. Tear It Down is the next track.
It's all about building bridges and not walls. It really is a kind of a commentary on where we all kind of stand about unity as opposed to divisiveness. And you get there through conversation and community. And in order to do that and to have that conversation, you got to get past whatever is separating us. And so, again, it's not a political thing. It's more about, you know, our human nature, you know, just a suggestion.
Well taken. October Song is the next track.
October Song, the riff, I had the acoustic riff, or the slow mellow riff. I had that for well over a decade. And for all that time, Scotty Hill kept saying, dude, would you please write something to that? And it was more of a practice thing that I would do on acoustic guitar. It would be like a warm-up thing. I would practice with starting off with that and move on to other stuff. And one day I was at Rachel's house, and we were spending like a week together writing. And I had the door open to the room I was staying in. He happened to be downstairs, and there's a lot of wide open space, so the acoustics are really great and sound carries. And so it was in the morning, and I woke up and I picked up the acoustic and I started playing that. So finally we get in later on, a couple hours later, we get in the studio, his studio at his house, and we sit down opposite from each other. And I go, all right, you know, after some conversation, all right, what do you want to work on? He goes, that riff you were playing this morning. I'm like, really? I go, I'm stumped, bud. I don't know. Like, I've been stumped on this for 15 years or however long it was. But that particular moment was when we started talking about what the feelings that brought up in us, just that riff, what that sort of, how that spoke to us. And we ended up, as we progressed with the writing and the melodies, and a lot of the melodies came before the music. And then we came up with more music as we went along. And then when we go into the heavy part in the middle, we were kind of silently thinking about, you know, ideas in our own head. And I played that kind of by accident. And he's like, what is that? And I go, I don't know. I literally played it by accident. Like, I wasn't like, check out this idea. I was just fooling around. And he's like, there it is. Let's go there. I'm like, sure. I love that riff. And then it took on another life of its own, much in the same way when we wrote Quicksand Jesus. And so we felt like this thing was a story. And in a nutshell, the story is we all experience loss in life, but with loss comes new blood and new birth. It's the cycle of life. And while we may mourn loss, we can still celebrate the life before and the life after. And so, not to get too, you know, existential or anything, but it was, that's kind of what it is about. And we really wanted to tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and have it be very climactic. And so that was a really fun song to be a part of.
Right on. And then World on Fire is the closing track on the album.
Again, at the very end of we thought we were done writing and recording. And when Nick had said, I think we need 2 more songs, and Rachel had brought in Not Dead Yet, I had this riff that I had written when I went home, and I just thought it was a really cool riff, and I was very confident in it. So I presented it to the guys, and everyone was like, this is awesome. Let's roll with this. And so we just started working that up in rehearsal. I had the riff written, the verse riff written, most of the B section written, and the chorus riff written, but no lyrics. And so we started throwing around ideas lyrically and melodically in rehearsal. And it took a minute for that to come together. And then when we went to record it, we made some changes with the drums and with the guitar part as well, that Nick came up on the fly. And again, an instance where he's challenging you, and you go, yeah, man, bring it on. I got this. And one of the cool things too that I have to say, and it was for this song as well as the rest of the songs, is that when we cut guitars, he had Scotty and I facing each other in the control room, and the loudspeakers cranked, and we were just feeding off of each other. We had never done that before, which it boggles my mind, because that's what we would do live. Like that's what we do. We face each other at times in the show. We're like pushing each other and applauding each other and encouraging each other. And this was like very, very in each other's faces in the best possible way. Like, dude, we got this. Like, let's bring it, man. Let's bring it. And Nick would sit in front of us with his back to us and be like, or eh. But it was great. It was great because I have such admiration for Scotty as a guitar player. Always have. We've never, ever had an argument regarding guitar parts or anything like that, or who should do what solo. There's a mutual respect and a mutual admiration for each other. And so getting the chance to do that, and we're sweating and we're banging it out. And it was just, that's rock and roll, man. That's the essence of part of the essence of what this record is just those moments of that are unplanned and completely from an emotional space within your spirit that comes forth and produces what we produced.
Killer. Thanks for sharing all that. I really appreciate it. As we wrap this up, what are you looking forward to most for in 2023 with Skid Row?
Touring and creating more music. We've always had an issue of writing on the road. Rachel and I aren't very good at it together or separately. We come up with riffs during sound check, and we'll put them on our phones, and then we'll revisit them later on. But with Erik being in the band, I mean, he's coming up with ideas in the dressing room while he's playing guitar or something like that. And that's inspiring, because it puts your head in a different space. You start thinking about, wow, what could this be? How can I help this become something? So it's kind of putting it at the forefront, as opposed to just sitting there drinking a beer and looking at your phone before a show, or listening to all the records I listen to when I'm on the before a show. And so I think it's going to be a little bit different, but I think just bringing this music to more people, bringing this record to more people, and just the joy that we all get from performing together in front of an audience. I'm just really looking forward to all the shows that we're doing. I mean, we're touring like 3.5 weeks with Buck Cherry in March, in April, and those guys are great, and it's going to be a really good show. And then we're going to South America, and we're going to Europe, and then we'll be back in the States again, and Australia and Japan. And so it's all really exciting to have these opportunities at this stage of our careers is really, really humbling.
Nice. Thanks for sharing all that. Congrats on this new chapter of the band. Thank you for this record. Shout out to earMusic also.
Yeah, they've done a great job, man. I mean, honestly, I give high praise to everybody over there. They've done a tremendous job with this band. they've been believers in us since the first conversation that I had with them, and that we had with them, and it's just been a great experience. And you don't often find that with a partnership between a band and a label. And not to look too far ahead, but it just, everything points to just a long and fruitful relationship.
That's awesome, man. Snake Sabo of Skid Row, thank you so much for hanging out with Ghost Cult. Best of luck with everything personal and professional coming up in your life. Thank you, man.
Thanks, bud. You as well. I love that you still have New York in your heart, man.
Yeah, I can't even cut it out if I wanted to. Thanks so much.